All right, good morning and welcome back to Faith Family United Church of Christ Bible Study 101. This is an overview. We're going through all the Bible, books of the Bible one at a time, or we're kind of grouping some of the letters together by their author or presumed author. Today we're going to do an overview of Paul's letters. It's been given that Paul has written 13 of the letters in the New Testament. Scholars have come to debate whether he actually wrote them or if they were written by his disciples or if they were written by his disciples, because some of them, they say, probably weren't written in Paul's lifetime. And of course, from the church history, we know that Paul probably died around between 62 and 65. And then there's other theories or other stories that say he actually left Rome when he was in prison and went to Spain like he wanted to do. But we don't have any documentation of that. So we say that he probably died in prison, or was as some of the legend goes, he was crucified in Rome. So, anyway, we want to look at the letters of Paul and just get an overview of all 13 letters that are attributed to him. Okay, so a little bit of review. Here we have the New Testament. Once again, we have the Gospels. We went through all the Gospels. Now, I want to say this because I said this the other day, but I want to make sure you all know. We went through the Gospels together as one group and just kind of showed what was there. It's the story of Jesus' life and from his birth to his crucifixion and beyond. And then we talked about the book of Acts. So after we finish this study, we're going to go back and we're going to, and when I say this study, I'm talking about the Bible 101. We're going to go back and we're going to look at Luke, and we're going to compare Luke to the other two synoptic gospels and show where the stories are the same and stories are different, and the basic overall themes of Luke and how they compare to the other two. So that's going to be a completely different study, and we're going to go in deep, and we'll probably take it one or two chapters at a time. So that's it. And so right now we've got the Gospels, the biblical, the Acts of the Apostles, as we talked last week. The Acts of the Apostles can be Acts of the Holy Spirit, because it's a lot about the Holy Spirit. And I told you that my view of that is it is a validation story, because it shows Peter's actions first, and then it shows Paul's, and they just line up almost perfectly. And so all the churches are getting the letters because the letters have come out before the Gospels, and so these letters are being passed around to all the churches, and they're like saying, who is this Paul that's writing us all these letters? And so what the Acts did was when the Gospels came out, of course, Paul's not in any of the Gospels, so they had to justify who Paul is and why he's writing these letters to the churches. And that's, I think, is a big theme of what is from Acts. And then we have the letters. Romans, Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, Timothy and Titus, Philemon. All of those are attributed to Paul in some way. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. The rest of them, sometimes Hebrew, or in ancient Christianity or Christian history, Hebrews was actually once attributed to Paul. Now they don't think it was Paul. Maybe one of Paul's disciples, maybe one of the ladies from Acts. But We don't know, a lot of these don't have authors on the names. Some of them do, of course, Paul's, in his greetings usually do. And then we have Peter and John and Jude. So those are our letters, and then of course the prophetic is the revelation of John. Okay. So, letters attributed to Paul. The first 7 here, that's 1 Thessalonians, Galatians, Corinthians, Philippians, Philemon, 2 Corinthians, and Romans were all probably written by Paul. Now, when I say that, church tradition has them all, 13, being written by Paul. And when we get down to the bottom, Timothy's and Titus, they have Paul's name in them. They have, of course, Timothy's name in them. And they've got other people, when we read from the book of Acts, that were with Paul or shared a ministry with Paul. So they were attributed, if you take them at face value, they're attributed to Paul. Ephesians, Colossians, and Thessalonians were probably written by either dictated from Paul, or one of Paul's disciples would have written those for Paul. Kind of like, if you know anything about, what is his name? I totally just lost his name. I can see his face. The guy that's in the Proved Black Holes. What is his name?
The astrophysicist.
Yes. He has MS.
He's dead.
Yeah, he died not too long.
Is that the one in the wheelchair?
Yes. What is his name? I can't think of his name right now. Anyway, he got to the point where he was nonverbal, and his assistants were helping, and he's still writing books, and he was dictating books to them, and people were asked, like, is he really doing that, or are you writing it for him? Because of course, his assistant is also a physicist. And so that's kind of like the thought behind these letters here is Paul might have, taught his disciples, and his disciples using his name, his authority to write them. Still using his thoughts and his teachings and his ministries. So those are the 3, and you can see 7 of them were most definitely written by Paul. We got the 3 of them, maybe, and then the 3 of them probably not, but still trying to use his authority. Maybe his disciples' had written them. Okay, so give you an idea of where they're at. Okay, we showed this the other day. Of course, Rome in Italy, Thessalonica, Philippi, Galatia is pretty big. It's actually a province. And then in that province, you got Colossae and Ephesus, and then over here you have Corinth in Greece. Corinth is really cool. It sits on top of a mountain. There is, right outside of Corinth, there's actually a channel that they dug to go from the sea to the other side of the little island there.
Like the Suez type thing?
Well, it's like this wide, it seems, but they can fit like a ocean liner through it. I mean, and then the walls are probably 100 feet on each side. And so it's like going through a crevice.
It's kind of rock.
Yeah, but that goes back to this time where they used to drag their ships. They used to harbor there
along the side.
Corinth.
Oh.
And then instead of trying to sail around, of course, in harsh weather, they would just drag their ships across. And then it ended up, nowadays, there's that big channel through. Anyway, so those are basically, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's 7 letters from Paul to the different churches, and there's 3 to, or 4 to actual people. That's Timothy, Titus, and then Philemon. And so those are who he's writing to and where they're at, just so you know where they're at. Okay. Now the dates, I'm just going to go with the ones that are today that are most probably written by Paul. Thessalonians is about 49 to 51 AD, somewhere in that time frame. They think that that's when Thessalonians was written. Now I have to make a statement. What happens is scholars sit down and they look at the Greek and they look at the way that the sentences are put together and the specific words are used and how they're used. And then they take that and weigh that with other materials that they have and across decades and say, look at how this is constructed, it's the same as this, and so this time period is a good time period to place that.
And it fits.
And then you have to take the internal, what it's saying. Who's it talking to? What are they saying? Who's listening to this? And so they come up with these dates. Now I say that because a lot of the manuscripts that we have, or pieces and parts of the manuscripts that we have, we dated them to the second, that's 100 plus, or the 3rd century, 200s plus. So that's the oldest manuscripts we have. So if that's the oldest manuscripts we have, of course Paul's long gone by then. Where's the originals? And that's the idea. And so the scholars go and say this is when the originals were pretty much written. I'll give you an example. If I say to you, Wesley, that shirt is bad, you probably shouldn't wear it. What am I saying?
You disapprove of it.
I disapprove of it?
It doesn't fit.
But it depends upon the lingo.
Well, exactly. The lingo, all right?
And today it's just the opposite.
And today I could be saying, and it's the way I say it. Of course, you can't read inflections into the words on a printed paper. If I said, Wesley, that's a bad shirt. You shouldn't be wearing it because I want to wear it, or something like that, And it changes the whole meaning. And so that's the idea between, how are they using the word in the sentence and in the paragraphs around it. And then saying, well, that must have been written in the 70s when you're a bad, I won't say that. what they used to say in the 70s,
Mm-hmm.
And you can see how words change over time. Christian was a derogatory term, but people embraced it, and now, well, years ago, Christianity, being a Christian was a good thing. So it went from being a derogatory thing to a good thing, and today, unfortunately, so many people that aren't Christians want a derogatory term, or they add on Christian hypocrite. So you can see how words change over time, and that's what's on these. And you can see I put them in kind of chronological order of when they were written. Thessalonians was probably the first one written. Galatians the second. There is suggestions that Galatians was written first in about 48. Corinthians, the 2nd Corinthians, of course, and then the book of Romans was, or the letter to the Romans was written, and then also right after the book of Romans was written, Paul was incarcerated and taken to Rome and imprisoned there under house arrest. And then while he was there, he probably wrote Philippians and Philemon. So, especially Philemon, because the slave runs away from his master, That's the story. It's one page. It's pretty interesting. The slave runs away and gets with Paul while he's incarcerated. And Paul says, no, that's not right. Go back to your master and I'll send you with a letter so that he will forgive you because he's a Christian.
Those who were writing and transcribing, what kind of education do these monks or do these clerks have?
They knew their letters. That's probably, the people that wrote them down, they knew their letters. A lot of them knew, understood what they were writing.
Okay.
Was able to read it and understand it.
There was no incentive to change it, their way of thinking.
Well, that's what, now I talked about this before, you know, if I'm copying this word for word,
Cindy took them out of the bag.
and all I'm doing is copying. And in some cases, you had an orator standing up and he's reading it, and you have anywhere from 5 to 50 scribes out there, and they're writing as he's dictating to them. So you got one guy reading the text and all these other ones writing the text. Now, I do this, and this is one of the reasons why people don't like to use the electronic books. I got a Kindle too, but guess what? Kindle, you can do this also. It's just not as, it's not right there in your face. But when I bet Bill's got this. What's in your margins? Your notes?
I'm here.
Yeah, well, do you write your notes in the margins
All
of your
over the
books?
place.
All over the place. And that's probably why we get some variations. Because a scribe's transcribing this, and he thinks, oh, wow, that means this. Let me put a note over here. And he puts it in the margin. And then someone else gets a copy of his manuscript. And he's going to make a copy for himself and his friends. So as he's making the copy, he's going along, left to right, and there's this thing in the margin. Well, I just keep going, and I write that right into the script. So it just kind of adds to it. So, and that's happened, and sometimes it's pretty obvious. Other times, scholars will say, we don't know, but it seems like this is the case. So, does that answer your question? But yes, they copied them. They were educated people that did this.
Okay.
So, any questions about this? You understand this? How these were the probable, actually written with the hand of Paul.
Why isn't 2 Thessalonians?
Second Thessalonians, they believe, was written later, and they believe that